Hi friends, welcome to this slow stitching vlog. I hope you enjoy the video you are about to watch. I had a lot of fun and enjoyment making this project, and I'm really happy to be sharing it with you here on my YouTube channel. So this project, like all projects, started on a bit of a whim, and I purchased a beautiful embroidered vintage tablecloth off a seller on Facebook with the intention that I would cut it up and use the embroidery in other slow stitch projects. But when I received the tablecloth, I just could not bring myself to cut it up. And as you'll see as you watch the video, and you can see some of the embroidery here in the corner, it was just far too pretty. Now, this tablecloth was damaged, so it did have two small holes in it, but I thought that I would definitely be able to hide that somehow. So when I pulled out this tablecloth and I was looking at it, it has 4 floral embroidered sections in the corners with a kind of vine-like embroidery that connects them. And as soon as I saw it, I just instantly could see in my mind a beautiful confetti Hexie heart in the center of this tablecloth. Now, I love making Hexie hearts, and I've made many over the years. The one that you will see me make in this video is definitely the biggest I've ever made. But once I had that idea pop into my head, I had to roll with it, and it didn't take me long I just kept thinking. I put the tablecloth aside and I kept thinking about it, and then I just decided, you know what, no, I've got to start this project. Even though, like many, I have lots of other projects on the go, I just felt like I really just needed to make this heart. And so I started to pull out my 1/2-inch Hexie box, which I keep all my pre-basted hexies in, and I started to raid through my stash because I knew I would need much more than what I had already basted. So as you can see me here, I pulled out some scraps, and I then proceeded to cut a whole heap of new papers. And not papers, sorry, fabric for my papers. Anyway, so as you can see, when I'm cutting my fabric for my shapes, I don't do it neatly. I just grab my fabric and I grab my paper template and I place it on top and I just snip around. Now, I always make sure that I have no less than 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. I actually prefer to cut a little bit bigger, about 3/8 of an inch. But I don't really measure as I go. I just eyeball it, and it makes this process a lot quicker and simpler when you take an approach like that. So I definitely had a kind of colour palette in mind for this project, and I knew I wanted it to be colourful because the embroidery itself is quite colourful. It has your pinks and your yellows, purples, the beautiful bright green. And so I knew that my Hexie heart would have to sort of represent those colours as well. And the colours are very much in my style. I'm very much without really meaning to, a rainbow kind of girl. I like to use all the colours. Sometimes I do limit my colour palette, but I love scrappy projects and quilts. So I just love using lots of colours, but they all have a certain tone to them. You'll see that none of them are overly bold or bright. They all sort of have the same kind of tonal value. I do mix in lighter colours or softer amongst them, but the overall feeling is a sort of, I would call it a bright pastel look. And a lot of the fabrics that I use, obviously they're floral, but I like to mix in, ginghams and spots. I have quite a lot of sort of the retro reproduction vintage sort of style fabrics and that sort of thing. And you'll see that particularly when I'm working with small shapes like the 1/2-inch hexies, I tend to use small scale prints because they show up a lot better on the scale of the hexagon itself. So here you can see that when I'm basting my 1/2-inch hexies, I do prefer to thread baste. You absolutely can glue baste 1/2-inch hexies, and I have done that in the past. But I find that when I'm trying to baste something so small, because I am folding those seams quite tightly and smoothing them down with my fingers, I just find that I get really sticky, gluey fingers. And it just doesn't make the process enjoyable for me. So I'm pretty much just as quick thread basting as I am glue basting when it comes to the 1/2-inch size. So I have a pattern called the Hexie Hearts pattern collection, and in that pattern there are, I think it's 11 different Hexie Heart designs using various different hexagon shapes from 1/4 inch all the way up to 1 inch. But for this particular heart, I knew that it was going to be a whole brand new heart pattern or heart design because I haven't made one as big as this before. And so when I started out, I always start with the hexie flower and then I work my way around that, and then I start to shape it into the heart shape itself. Now for this one, I got it to a certain size, and then I sort of laid it on the tablecloth, and I sort of looked and ummed and ahed. I thought, no, it's still not quite big enough. So I had to, I sort of got my container and I laid the heart down, and then I placed hexies all the way around the heart until I thought that it was a suitable size, and then I took a photo. And then I had that to go off because quite often I sit at night to do my stitching, and so I don't have the tablecloth with me when I'm doing that. I'm just sitting there watching YouTube mostly while I stitch away. So I thought I had it the right size, and then I had to go back and make it bigger. But I'm really happy with the size that it ended up, and I think it's the perfect fit for this tablecloth. So what you can see me doing here is I'm adding the hexies as I work my way around, and when I'm doing this, I'm using a whip stitch. Now you'll see that I stitch away from myself. Quite a few people stitch towards themselves, and it's all about finding whichever method is comfortable for you. I'm very conscious of my wrists and how they are sitting and how the action of stitching is affecting my wrists and shoulders these days. My mum, she's got arthritis in her wrists, and I want to be stitching for as long as possible. So I'm very conscious these days of the action that I use and supporting my arms and my wrists and my hands as I'm stitching. So quite often when I'm stitching at night, I actually have a cushion in my lap, and that supports my my left hand wrist, my left arm and wrist and hand as it's holding the work. It also takes the weight of the work, the cushion itself. That's just a little tip for you if you're noticing that the weight of holding your work is getting to you. Try putting a cushion in your lap because that will help take that weight. But I find it incredibly meditative to sit there and stitch this action, this repetitive action. You all know because you're watching this, you probably are a slow stitcher or you're an EPPer. And so you get that just calming effect that having that needle and thread passing through fabric is. So here I am working my way around, stitching one hexagon on at a time, stitching up the sides, and we continue like this until I get it to the right size. So I knew that even with the Hexie Heart being the right size, that the two small holes that were in it were not going to be covered by the Hexie Heart. So I needed something else to add. So I thought I would add in some hexie flowers around the outside as well. And that would mean that I could use a hexie flower to cover the two small holes. So I decided that I wanted the centres of my hexie flowers to be a sort of off-white colour. So here I am making the centres for these. And then I ended up making, how many did I make? 3, 5, 7, I'm pretty sure, 1/2 inch hexie flowers. And then I had, I think it's 4 3/8 inch hexie flowers as well. And you'll see me make those flowers along in the video. So I love making hexie flowers. If I am ever in a bit of a funky mood, or I'm kind of I want to stitch but I don't know what project I want to work on, or like I want to stitch but a project's not calling to me, then I usually just grab out my hexie palette boxes and I just sit there and I just make flowers. And it always just makes me feel so much better. It's kind of like when I'm working on a Hexie Heart or I'm working on my 1-inch scrappy quilt, because there's no thought that really needs to go into it other than selecting what hexie I'm going to add each time. It's just a very freeing kind of, I feel like I just don't need to really think. It all just sort of happens on its own, and it just makes me feel so much better. I always feel better if I'm having a rough day and I just sit down and I make some flowers, because I love flowers and real flowers bring me so much joy. But hexie flowers, I think they bring me just as much joy. And if I could surround my house with hexie flowers, I think I'd be the happiest person on earth. But so here I am basting the centres, and you can see some of the flowers that I've made there. And just a side note, look at this beautiful embroidered tray cloth that my work is sitting on here with the daisies. Isn't it stunning? This is a piece that I bought from Beck, and I'm pretty sure I showed it in one of my haul videos, but I just cannot bring myself to cut this up because it is in perfect order. Like, there's nothing wrong with it. And it just makes me feel so, just watching this and looking at this scene, just that brings me joy, makes me feel so happy too. So I hope as you're watching this and you're watching me stitch, I hope that you're stitching, and I hope that your stitching is bringing you joy, and that seeing this is bringing you joy as well, because who couldn't be joyful looking at all these pretty hexies and hexie flowers and embroidery? Like, it's just puts a smile on my face, and so I really hope that it's putting a smile on your face too. So we're going to stitch some flowers together and then we'll come back. So here you've been watching me, we've made the Hexie flowers and now I've been removing the papers. So as you've been watching, you've been seeing that I use my embroidery scissors and I snip the one sort of stitch of the basted thread stitch. Does that make sense? I stitch one thread from the basted stitches and then I use my embroidery scissors to sort of fold back the seam and pop the paper out. Now I find this the easiest way and the quickest way to do it. I leave all of my basting stitches in the back of my work. I don't pull all of the stitches out. I use a white, just plain white cotton thread when I'm basting for this reason, so that it can't be seen from the front. And I have no problem leaving that thread in the back. Nobody's going to see it. It's not going to affect the work at all. The only time that I would take the thread all the way out is if I was using Liberty Tanner lawn fabric, because it's a lighter weight fabric and potentially there is the risk of being able to see those stitching, that left in thread on the back of the work. But really I don't take it off. Now when it comes to appliquing, sometimes those threads will get in the way, and then if they're long, I might snip them back a little bit so they're a bit shorter, but generally I just push them back behind the work as I applique, and I just don't worry about them. So all the flowers have had their papers taken out, and now I'm going around the outside edge of the heart and taking the papers out. You'll see that I take my papers out as I go. So the only papers that are left in are the ones on the outside edge. All the papers from the center of the heart have already been taken out. I like to take my papers out as I'm working because it reduces the weight of my work. Leaving those papers in will make your work a lot heavier, and again, heavier to hold, and that puts strain on your wrists. So I like to take my papers out. It also means that the work is more flexible. So I'm able to fold and manipulate the piecing work as I go, and I'm not then bending my papers. The more you have to bend or fold a paper as you're stitching, the less life that paper will have. So here is the tablecloth in all her beautiful glory. You may have spotted the two small holes down the bottom at the start when I think I showed them. Yep, there they are, the two small holes on the left side there. But the embroidery itself was just really, really pretty, and I loved this kind of vine. There's the small hole there, you can see, and but that was the only real issue that this tablecloth had. There were no stains on it. So here is my heart laid out and the flowers, and this is the layout that I decided to go with, and I was really happy with it. I thought the placement was good. The hexie flower down there totally covered the holes, so I didn't have to worry about that. And I just thought it looks so pretty. So the next step now is to fix the heart and the flowers down. So for what I do for that is I use a product called Heat and Bond or Fix. And the first thing that I do is once the papers are all out, I'm giving my heart a press just to sort of make all those seams sit flat on the back, and so that they're not popped out on the side, they're all nice and neat. And I do the same thing with the flowers, and then I cut a piece of Fix that is the same shape as the heart, but I come in from the edge. So you'll see when I lay it down that it sits in the center. It doesn't extend beyond the heart itself. So here is my piece of Fix that I've cut to sit within the heart. And then for the little flowers, I tend to just cut sort of like a rough square or rectangle shape. Again, I come in from the edge of the flower itself and just mark myself a little rough square, and then I cut that, and that becomes the piece that I use. So once my applique adhesive is cut to the right size, then I use a warm iron with no steam to fix it onto the piecing. Now I lay a tea towel over the top just to protect the work and make sure that none of the sticky glue or anything like that gets onto the iron. And then I press and leave my iron sitting on the piece. I've sped this up, but I leave it sitting on the piece for a little while to really get the adhesive to stick to the side. Obviously, you're putting it onto the wrong side. Don't make the mistake of putting it on the right side because you will not get it off. And then once I've fixed it, then I can peel off the backing paper, and that leaves the glue on the applique piece. And then I position it onto the tablecloth itself. So make sure that whatever you're putting it on has been ironed, so there's no creases or anything like that in it. And then position it. Now, you could, if you positioned it and then you ironed it and then you're like, oh God, no, it's not the right size, potentially you could peel it back off, but I've never done that, so I can't say whether or not it would come off without causing any problems or any damage to either the piecing itself or the fabric that you were piecing it to. So now I decided I didn't want this to move when I was ironing it because I wanted it to stay in the right spot. So I am putting in just some applique pins just to hold it in place. Also, I'm putting the pins in to hold it in place while I carry the whole thing back over to my ironing board. And this was just because I didn't want anything to move. The tablecloth itself is quite a slippery fabric. It's really soft. And so I wanted to make sure that I didn't, that it didn't move. So once I had pinned everything in place, I very carefully moved it back over to my ironing board. And I started with the Hexie flower. The Hexie Heart. So I didn't lay the tea towel over the top this time because I found that the heat wasn't going through the two layers and fixing the heart properly to the tablecloth. So I did just iron straight on, and I pressed, as I'm doing this, always follow the instructions on whatever bonding material you're using. But I find that I've got to press quite hard and firm and leave my iron sort of in the one spot for a little bit of time to really get that glue to sort of, I guess the glue has to melt so that it can then adhere the applique piecing. And obviously I took out the pins so that I didn't melt my applique pins or damage my iron. And so I did this for the heart first, made sure that was stuck down in place. And then I did the same method for all of the flowers. So once I had used the iron to adhere all the flowers and the heart to the tablecloth, it was time to start appliquing. Now I did end up going back in and putting some applique pins around the outside edge of the Hexie Heart, and I did that because the adhesive or the bonding that I used, as you would have seen, I came in sort of 2 hexagon rows from the edge. So because this tablecloth is, like I said, quite slippery, I wanted to make sure that the tablecloth wasn't bunching underneath that section where it hadn't been adhered to the heart itself, if that makes sense. And just so that, it was all going to be nice and neat and smooth, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So for the applique itself, I do a slip stitch method. So it's an invisible applique, and I'm using the same thread that I use for piecing, which is the Superior Threads bottom line thread in a colour called Statue. This is my go-to preferred thread, and it's my favourite thread for EPP and applique, and I like it because it's very fine. It's a 2-ply polyester 60 weight thread, and being polyester, it's very strong, and that means that I can pull my stitches quite tight, especially when I'm piecing. I pull my stitches quite tight so that my seams come together and they're not loose, and you also can't see my stitches from the front by doing that as well. So I like to use that particular colour because I do such scrappy work. That colour blends in with the most amount of fabrics, and I use it with darks, lights, whites. The only time I sort of change my thread is if I'm doing you can see there I'm snipping one of those stray basting threads. The only time I change my piecing thread colour is if I was doing a lot of dark prints, or say I was doing a lot of deep blue or deep teal or something. Then I would change my thread to probably more of a mid-grey colour. I don't tend to fully colour match. Also because I don't want to be changing my thread all the time when I get to a different colour hexagon or different colour flower. But because most of my work is scrappy, one thread just does it all for me. So the slip stitching applique, I find that just as soothing and meditative as I do piecing, and I really enjoy the process of applique. So I hope you enjoy stitching along with me as we applique the heart and the flowers to the tablecloth. Excuse me. You're on my sewing. Can you move, please? Can you move, please? And so here is my finished tablecloth, and I am so happy with the results. I think the Hexie Heart and the flowers just fit absolutely perfectly in with the embroidered flowers, and I'm just so happy that I could give this beautiful tablecloth that someone has taken the time and embroidered these beautiful flowers and put the love into that piece. I'm so happy that I could give it a new lease of life, and that I can now enjoy it. And of course, the best way to enjoy a tablecloth as beautiful as this is to go out into the garden and get some pretty spring flowers and pick a bouquet and make myself a cup of tea in my beautiful strawberry teapot, get one of my vintage teacup sets and have morning tea, which on this day was some homemade pikelets with lemon curd and raspberry jam, and sit down to enjoy my stitching with this beautiful tablecloth and enjoy a heartwarming cup of tea. So I really hope you have enjoyed this video, enjoyed seeing this tablecloth get a new lease on life. I hope you've been having some stitchy time while you watch, and that your stitching is bringing you so much joy. Because, it brings me so much joy, and I love sharing that joy with you here on YouTube and on Instagram, through my blog on my website, and it's just such a wonderful craft, and I love that it connects us all together, and I feel very blessed to be part of this community. So I really hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you again soon. Happy stitching, friends.